Already, this is the lesson 11 of the Zero to Hero Power App Saga. We have had a number of different presenters here in the last few weeks, and if you are joining us for the first time, you are welcome to go to the YouTube channel and kind of get a feel for the things that we talked about. Today, it's my honor and privilege to bring Daniel Christian here. If you don't know who Daniel is, I don't know where you've been hiding. I mean, Daniel is one of the guys who records a lot for YouTube. He does a lot of sessions, formerly a lot of Power Apps and SharePoint content, and amongst other things. But I've seen a lot of your new content, Daniel, on virtual reality and RPA, bunch of RPA. Maybe we'll do some RPA next here for Zero to Hero. But I do appreciate you dedicating the time and your brains to this group of people. Floor is yours. I don't want to steal any more of your precious time here. Thanks
Thank
again.
you. All right, let me just do that, share that. Okay, you can confirm you can see it. Cool. Can somebody confirm? Yes, no?
Yes, that's great.
All right, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, and Victor, I won't be keeping any eyes on the comments. So if any questions come up, just feel free to stop me. I like having a conversation going back and forth. Yeah, which just a few of us.
Okay, I got you.
Cool, thank you. So yeah, today one of the topics I actually wanted to talk on was Power Virtual Tables. I almost said Power Virtual Agents, Power Virtual Tables. The reason because is this is fairly new, and so there's been a lot of questions on this topic. I think, what is it? Why does it work? And what is the need for that? So we'll go over all of that, and then it's going to be a very interesting conversation on that. About me. I'm a Microsoft MVP and a certified trainer. These are all my social media places. I'm on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn. You can, on any of them. I have a very active YouTube channel as well. If you just go to YouTube and search for Daniel Christian Power Apps or Daniel Christian what MVP, you'll find a bunch of my stuff. I speak about the entire Power Platform. So I just don't cover one thing, like and Victor said, I pretty much cover the entire Power Platform spectrum because together it works much better if you just instead of just siloing it to one. So the agenda for today's meeting, we're going to talk about what is the whole virtual table. We'll take examples of the virtual table. We'll talk about the limitations, and then I want to end with my 4 reasons of why you should consider using it. So that's basically everything that we'll go through. So let's just get started. I want to talk about what is virtual tables. So this entire concept of virtual tables was actually not new. It existed in the Dynamics 365 side, specifically Dynamics 365 CRM side, but there was a lot of work involved in that in the infant state, early stages, which is why it never took much traction. So I just want to call that out. That this is something that has been there for a while. The new easy to use, which I'll demo you through, is so much more. It's an improvement, but just keep that in mind. That is not completely new. But here's what it is. The advantages of using this right now and why we want to use it is you can represent data. Emphasis on the word represent, right? It's you represent data from SharePoint or SQL as a table directly in Dataverse. So the word represent means is that you are not going ahead and now making a copy of it. You are going ahead and representing it. And this will all make a lot more sense when I do the demo, but keep that in mind, that you are basically just representing the data, hence the term virtual table. It's not a full copy, it's just a representation of that. And therefore, there is no replication of data, which means you are not using, if you in this in a call are using the term data flows, that's what data flows is you go ahead and make a copy, or so you make a connection to whichever is the other data source like SharePoint or SQL or something, and you're actually making a copy of it into Dataverse. That's what we call as replication. Uh, Virtual tables is not. Virtual tables represents the data in Dataverse. And so, but it does allow all these type of CRUD operations: create, read, update, delete. You're able to do all of that. Important thing to note over here is that it still is bound by the permissions you have to each of those other data sources. So say, excuse me, in your SQL or in the Oracle places, if you've got access to, do only create, read, and update, but you cannot delete, well, that applies when you go ahead and create a virtual table as well. So just keep that in mind, is that it does not go ahead and overwrite your permissions to each of these other external data sources. Your permissions over there will still apply. And so you are able to carry out the exact same operations directly inside that. So here's actually a screenshot of something that Microsoft provided to us, this image of what this whole virtual table concept is all about. So you are able to get these three data sources which are currently allowed right now in SQL, Excel, SharePoint. And then you go ahead and make a connection using whatever is that data that is provided, and you do what is called as a connection reference. And then that connection reference is then opened up as a representation into your Dataverse as a virtual table. So that's basically, it's almost like a simple, very, high level description of this 4-step process that's happening. And that's the whole concept of the virtual table. So like I mentioned over here, currently there are only 3 data sources that are allowed: Excel, SharePoint, and SQL Server. Calling out that from SharePoint and SQL Server, it does work with both SharePoint Online and SQL Server, and Azure SQL. It works with both of them. So you just want to make sure that, regardless of how it is, if you are using any of these things like a SharePoint Online or SharePoint Server with using on-premises gateway connection, same thing with SQL, whether you're using Azure SQL or SQL Server with on-premises gateway connection, then that also can be pulled in. All right, so it's just, that's the example of that. So what I want to do right now is I want to actually jump into directly the demo piece over here. So we'll go ahead and start taking a look at how this all works. All right, so I'm going to now go straight into my where are we? Thought I had it open. Let me just close this one out. Yep, right here. So here I am now. I'm going to go from the Power App side. You could go ahead and do it directly from Power Automate as well, but I want to do it from the Power App side. And just as good habits, whenever I come into my Office 365, I'm trying very hard not to have too many bookmarks because everything is there. So even if you don't remember where you're going, always start with office.com. I've been telling a lot of people, especially those who are new into this entire Microsoft 365 Power Platform cloud world, go into your Office 365, and then on the top left, where it is called as App Launcher, and we also jokingly call that as the waffle icon, click on that, and then over there, you can go and see everything that you have access to. A very good way to not be dependent on these bookmarks, all right? Just little tidbits here and there I'm going to share. So I have access to Power Automate, so I'm going to go into my Power Automate, all right? So here I'm in my Power Automate. A couple of new things have already happened in Power Automate, and that's something I'll be doing a lot. I'll be kind of sharing these tips and new changes on the fly because I'm here so much. I'll just share that. New things that have happened is over here, this navigation menu has actually changed. Right now, before it was basically all of it together, but now if you want to go ahead and click on, we will want to go ahead and actually get the tables. Tables is not easily available here. Well, I'll click on more, and then now I can go ahead and pin the table. So I'm going to be referencing tables. If you want to go to Power Automate, you want to go to Power Pages, Power BI, that's fine. Click on Power Platform, and then you can go ahead and visit all the other members of the Power Platform family. So this navigation is actually improving. It gives you the flexibility to clean it up as much as you want, but you can also go ahead and get everything back how you liked it and pin it again. So here we are in Power Platform. In Power Apps, I click on Tables. Now, this is where we would normally come in and create our Dataverse tables, going ahead. And some of you know over here back in the day, we used to call this as entities, common data services entities. Well, now it's Dataverse tables. So here I come in, and now I go and click on plus new table. And in the drop down, this is what it is. The new thing is new table from external data. So when I click on this new table from external data, this section pops up. Now, before we go and do anything over here, well, actually, let's just talk about that. When the connection comes up, it tells you these are the existing connections that you have already available. Remember, right now the virtual tables only works for Excel, SharePoint and SQL. Well, it's already showing me that I've got SharePoint and SQL Server. So what does that mean? What it means is that any of your existing connections that you have made in any of these environments, those are directly being used for your virtual tables. Keep that in mind that this is, it's not kind of a brand new thing. Yes, it is pretty awesome. It is a new functionality. However, it still goes ahead and uses the existing things that you've done. So in my other environments too, if I went ahead and selected any other of my environments, all right, over there, and most of my environments already have a connection for SQL and SharePoint. But in that case, also any other environments that you come to, if you've got those connections already available and you come to plus table for external data, you will see right here in the loading connections, it will show you, do you have any of these SharePoint and SQL Server connections? Now, in my first environment, which we were just in, my default environment right here, yeah, in that one, I think it was the one. Let's go and take a look at that. I accidentally, or for whatever reasons, I had two SharePoint connections over here. See right there, two SharePoint connections. So both of them got pulled in because it's not, it doesn't know what you're making. So it's going to say, hey, these are the two connections that you already have. Feel free to pick each one of them. So the key point over here is that you can go ahead and select your environment ahead of time, whichever one you want, and then it will go ahead and use any of those connections that you already have, specifically for SharePoint and SQL, and then you can go and start leveraging that. So here we go. I'm going to come in. I'm going to go to a new table from external data. I've already got some SharePoint connectors over here. I've got a lot of SharePoint tables as well. So I'll go ahead and select that SharePoint option. Now in the advanced options, you can go and say the manually configure connection reference. I already got my connection. So I'll just go and use the connection. Connection references is a really powerful functionality, especially if you're working with, the concept of solutions. You package everything together and it makes exporting and importing so much more easier. In fact, solutions is the way to go, which what Microsoft recommends. Individual apps and flows buildings is now called as a classic design. So if you're not into the whole solution process yet, highly recommend that you start getting familiar with the solutioning over there. So anyway, I will go and now select SharePoint and I'm going to go and click on next. Now here, this looks so similar to the process of when you are building, say, a Power Automate flow. Because when you're building a Power Automate flow, it will ask you, like, you're using a SharePoint connection for a SharePoint action. The first thing it'll ask you is like, go ahead and put in a URL. You can either go and put in a URL or you can select any of the existing ones. Now, beauty of those connections that you have, the concept of SharePoint connections is it all ties down to your original permissions for the data source, which means these list of SharePoint sites that you see are only the ones that you already have access to. So that's one of those fears that I always talk to the IT administrators. Like I said, no, you are not going to see all your sites over here, right? Your company might have hundreds and hundreds of thousands of sites. You're not going to see all of them here. You will only see the sites which this user is in, which in my case is me. These are only the sites that I have access to, and therefore those are the only ones that I will see. Very important means point over here because your permissions at the data source are also applied over here when you're creating the virtual table. So I'll just go to my POC site and I've selected it. Now the next button comes up. I'll click on new. And now it will also go in that site and it's pulling all the lists that I have access to. If any of you are familiar with M365 and you've worked with the SharePoint side, you know that you can have granular level permissions inside a site. I could have access to a site, but I could only have limited access to, say, some SharePoint lists or document libraries. Like those can happen inside a site level. So all those custom permissions that you might have in that site, they apply over here too. You are only able to see lists that you basically have access to. So that's basically what it is in this case as well. So I'm just going to scroll down a little bit. I have some demo ones right here. There's a demo one, so I'm going to select that. And then I keep this box checked. It says configure table and column names that will be used in Dataverse. Keep that box checked in because you do want to go and configure that. And it'll make sense in just 1 second. Keep also in mind that this refresh option is there because say you are getting excited that you had a plan that I'm going to go and create a list in SharePoint, but then and then I'm going to come over here and make the connection. You got too excited. You actually came over here to start making the connection. You forgot to make that list. Well, keeping this open you might still open up another tab, go create that SharePoint list. It may not show up immediately over here. And if that's the case, you've created a list after the fact, just hit refresh and your list will show up over here. So I'm going to click on demo now, demo one, my list name, and then now it comes into this place. Now we just got to wait because it is going to load all our required fields. This is the pretty awesome part that I liked. It is able to go ahead and now replicate a lot of processes that we followed when we were creating our own Dataverse tables. So all of this might be very familiar to you. Remember, we went and got put in our display name for the data table. It would go ahead and add a plural automatically. Then it would put in a schema name. Any of you who are database people like SQL and Oracle, you know the concept of the schema. And basically, it's just going and saying the overall table name. What is that name over here? So that's basically it creates that schema name. After that, it is also gone ahead and pulled what is your primary field. Now, if you know, if you know from a SharePoint side, title is the always the primary out of the box column that is created. It is also there for the important required field, which is there. It's nothing you can change. You can rename it, but you can never delete it. The title, which is a single line of text, will always be there. So that's why they've always gone ahead and called the primary field also over here as title. And then here on the top, you will see that it is required for Dataverse to also have our Dataverse in the virtual tables to have a external primary key. This is very important. So whether you're using SQL or you're using SharePoint, each of them need to have a primary identifier column type in its data source. Both SQL and SharePoint have this functionality. SharePoint does it out of the box. In SQL, you have to configure a table column. You actually either do it through the SQL Server Management Studio, or you can just run a SQL query and create that primary column. So this is basically how it is. In our SharePoint site, like I said, ID is always there. So I go ahead and now create, when I pull this in, I'm making this relationship. It automatically goes in and says, okay, this is on my SharePoint site, so it'll go and have this ID column. And so right now you've got the opportunity to go ahead and do any renaming that you want to do. On the left side, this is the columns that you have directly pulled in from SharePoint. It's very important to note that it's actually going and pulling in the exact column names. Here's what I mean. If I were to now go to my SharePoint list and I looked at this request type first name, on the SharePoint, you go ahead and actually create I'll look at my column and it'll actually be request space type, probably with an uppercase R and an uppercase T. That's how it looks like right now. But I know is as a good practice, especially if you're going to use those SharePoint lists for developer type of stuff. It's always good when you're creating a brand new list. Is first go ahead and put everything as one word. This is the example. When I created that column, I always type everything in as a request as one word, like request type, lowercase, no space. Then you can go ahead and change that name back to that. So I'm sharing this little tidbit. In fact, that was one of my favorite interview questions I used to ask to SharePoint developers. Uh, they would come and ask me, hey, I would ask them this question, like, you're a SharePoint developer, you're going to customize this list. Tell me how you would go ahead and build a list. Like I was listening and waiting for this one. Because this will clean up so much of your future work that you're going to do when you start making REST API calls and stuff like that. So you always see the exact column names that are coming in from SharePoint. This is going to be now the display name. Excuse me. Let me just take a quick drink on that. I don't know why it's itching. All right, much better. This is the name that you can't make any changes to. This is going to be now the display names that you see from the SharePoint side. And then this is going to be the display name from the Dataverse virtual table site. Now you've got the functionality to go ahead and change any of these names, at least these ones. But these ones is what you cannot change, right? So you can scroll down and see them all. We are good. So I'm going to go and click on next. And so here it gives you a quick overview of what is happening. On the left side, it is our external data source. It is coming from SharePoint, tells you the site name, goes and tells you the list. It also gives you the option to go ahead and now change it. And if you do it, it basically just takes you back again. And then right now it goes ahead and lets you do this, that you're going to go and make this external table. And then if you can, it also gives you a good overview. What is the display name, plural name, primary column, and the total number of columns. I like everything that I have over here. So I'm just going to go and click on finish. And then now it'll go and start creating your virtual table. Now this sometimes varies. In my case, I have 26 columns. I already have some data over there. So it does take a few minutes actually to go and create this. This is still new. It is still in the preview. I suspect that this will get faster. You remember back in the day when we used to create environments? Oh my gosh, it used to take a while for that environment creation that used to happen. Now environments create a lot more faster. I suspect the exact same thing is going to happen with these virtual tables as well. As you can see, I clicked on it and it is creating my virtual table and the wheel is spinning and we are waiting. But this should get a lot more faster. But let's think about what it's doing in the back end. Like it's not creating a full table for us. It's not pulling in Dataverse. It's not going ahead and making a copy of the data. But what it is doing is it is going and creating some virtual table in Dataverse because that's why it went and gave us, asked us going ahead and putting in those table names, column names and everything. So some kind of, referencing table is already being created in Dataverse. And then it has to go ahead and do all that plumbing in the back end. Like why is, do I go ahead and connect this Dataverse virtual table over to a SharePoint list? How do I go and do that connection at each and every column base? So there is a lot of mechanical engineering work happening in the back end. So it's actually going in and creating this information here. So while it does that, let's actually go and open up our SharePoint site. I'll just go and open up my SharePoint, try to find the POC one, which is right here. And in the POC, the actual list that we have, it is called as demo one. So I'll go my site contents and I'll scroll down. And this is it. This is basically the list that I have. Is I went and selected demo one. See that URL and then the list name. So right now that is what it is. URL POC ends with POC. This URL ends with POC. And then the list name, that's what it is. Demo one. And there's demo one. The reason I want to show this to you is so that when we go now over to a Dataverse and do a Dataverse virtual table, you should be able to see all of this. And it says, oh, that's interesting. Click on finish. I've never seen that error before. We'll let it run one more time. Otherwise, we'll be able to go and do that. Now, the error doesn't come up because of we just went to the SharePoint site. That's not the reason why the error comes up. Something else that is happening in the backend. If it does that error, we'll just go ahead and create another connection. It's not a permissions problem because you can see that I have access to this list. I was able to come here. I can see the new. I can go up to the settings. I can actually see list settings. So that just tells me at least I have the everyday use to this list. But we'll give it one more minute, and if it still gives me that error, we'll go and try to create another one.
Hey, Dan,
Yeah, go
can I
ahead.
make a quick comment here?
Yeah.
Folks, where you see CR341 underscore under schema name, the reason why it's showing that it's because it's inheriting the settings for the publisher associated with the CDS default solution. But there is a way for us to change that if for some reason that particular prefix is not one that you like. So while you're running, I'll hijack the screen for like 5 seconds then, and I'll
Okay.
give it
Yeah.
back to you.
Meanwhile.
If you want on your setup of the environment, when you start doing this, you can look for the Common Data Services default solution, open that, and there will be information about the solution itself right here under overview. You can click details, and then you can edit the default publisher associated with that solution, and then input the prefix that you want. And then when you create objects, it's going to use the prefix, your preferred prefix. If you don't like, the CR15C or whatever, it's displayed on your environment. Okay. All right, back to you then.
Cool. I'm actually going to share back. Over here. I'm going to attempt back again. So we got tables. We'll go and create another table, new table. We'll try to see. Let's see. Yeah, next. Go back to that POC. Next, search for, let's do demo 3. Makes a full connection over here. Loading required things. All looks good. Here, 20 columns. This is Dataverse 3, I mean, demo 3. So it's going to go and create that. And hopefully this time it will go and create this entire thing. It's the same site. I just created another list because I think demo 3 has a little bit more list contents. So it'll go and create that entire table, the virtual table directly inside Dataverse. Because once we do it over there, I want to at least show you that how we can provide those CRUD operations, create, read, update, delete, and it works both ways. So if you do it in SharePoint, you come to Dataverse, you won't see whatever you deleted, whatever change you made, it will reflect in Dataverse, and then vice versa as well. So let's just wait for this thing to finish over here. That's funny because I did a full test in the morning in preparation for this. It went through just fine. I know it does take a while though. It still takes a solid few minutes for this thing to at least a minute and a half to for this thing to create it, because it is still in this preview stage right now. But what we could do is, while this is going on, let's jump straight into some of the things that I do want to talk about. Is we can talk about this limitations over here. In the limitations of the virtual table right now, as we know, search functionality is not supported for virtual tables because they do not have the actual persistent data. The data is not sitting inside Dataverse. It's not there. It's just a virtual table. Once created, a virtual table cannot be changed to a standard non-virtual table. So you can't make that change in bringing it directly inside a virtual table as an actual Dataverse. And then the reverse also is true. Like a standard table cannot be converted into a virtual table. Virtual table and the standard Dataverses cannot be switched back and forth on that. That's one of the limitations. Auditing is not supported. When I say auditing is not supported, it is not supported in Dataverse because it's not an actual table. It is sitting in somewhere else. And then offline caching of values is not supported for virtual tables for the same reason. It is not sitting inside virtual tables. So technically, it is not offline over there as well. Primary fields are required. I just showed you when we were creating one for SharePoint that the ID column was there for SharePoint. Also, only the following column types are supported right now: string, multi-line, whole number, things like that. A couple of things are not allowed right now. Attachments of files and images not supported in either side on that. And for SharePoint specifically, person and manage metadata type columns. These are pretty complex column types. Again, they are not included over there. So just wanted to call that out. All right, let's go back in. And I don't know why I'm getting this error today. What did you do, Victor?
Now I've seen it today, that some solutions were being pushed while I was trying to create objects, and I was getting it. It was like the Microsoft was pushing updates to some of the base solutions while I was trying to create objects. It could be the same.
Could be.
We
All
could
right.
give it another try, and then if you want to just do talk points on an environment that you have this created, that's fine as well. But
Yeah, I'll take a look. I think I have a environment virtual table already created, so I'll take a look at that. We'll give it one more shot, and then we'll go back and take a look at it as well. I think it was in my default one. I'm gonna give it one more shot. It is taking a much longer. I mean, by this time, it usually gives me this update. I've been waiting usually for about a good 20, 30 seconds, and then it just pushes through and the table is ready. And then after that, it looks like your regular Dataverse table, honestly. So we'll give it one more minute. If not, we'll go and find an existing one that I already have. Yeah, I'm gonna refresh this one. By this time, it should have come in. So let me see. Standard filter by contains virtual. All right, so I do have this demo one. So I'm going to go in here. This look and feel is very similar to our Dataverse place over there. And this was actually the same thing that I was going to, showing you the Dataverse, the virtual table 3. What it shows you over here is this type. What is the type? And this is specific. It actually says Dataverse. In fact, it says it last modified that. After this, you are able to go ahead and do all this other stuff, like, columns, going ahead and adding all these other columns that you pull. This is all pretty common. You've seen this functionality, so this is also not very not very new. You are familiar with this, but after that, you are able to go ahead and now do some editing directly in the editing. You can do bulk requests. So if I were to now again go back in and I select my information that I wanted, simple things, the actual device and all that, you are able to see this information here. Now, whatever that you do in your, and actually I want to also go ahead and get my other columns in. So go back into edit table. I can go back one more step back there. There, I want to get the ID column. So right there, that ID column. This ID column is directly coming from the SharePoint side. So it's going ahead and loading. That is actually not the ID column that is pulling in. Let's see. It went and selected in. Either way, we'll go and find the one. So there's the Ultra device, and then we'll go and see. I can get the device type. Name would be the one. So there's the device type, and then what is the actual column. So this, again, this functionality you're very familiar with. So I can come here and I can go ahead and now edit this thing. Now, when I edit this thing right over here, see employee, it is the AC, edit actually this column or this row that I want to work with, goes directly inside Dynamics 365 to work on. So it gives you the same look and functionality over there. Or I could also have done that in directly in bulk over here. I have that feature and functionality. If I went and either updated this directly in this side inside the Dataverse area, or if I went ahead and updated that directly in the SharePoint, both of them will sync. Because remember, SharePoint is your base location. Same thing will be for SQL as well, because it's a virtual table. So if I deleted something directly inside the SharePoint one, it will go ahead and reflect that directly inside whatever that you do in your thing over there. So what I want to do as an example is this Aspire M for Ultrabook. I want to go and delete that, right? So that's what we've gone ahead and done. We'll actually delete a few of them. In fact, just to make sure that I go and take a screenshot of what it is that I'm deleting so I don't forget it. We're going to delete a few of these. Got that screenshot here. Perfect, got it. So we're just going to delete a few of these ones right there. I'm going to delete this record too. Going ahead and deleting this record as well, all right? So now if you go to our SharePoint, which is the demo number 3, click on that. I'm going to go to demo 3 side. In my laptop, and the laptop that we had was, again, of the type Ultrabook, and it's under the name. Yeah, name. So we went and created a new one, so at least it's there. Filter it based on the name that we have. Filter by. I should not actually see this Aspire. So if the ones that we deleted was Aspire S5 and S7, I don't see it here. It was there because we were able to go and do that. So keep that in mind, that the deletion that you do in Dataverse, it is not sitting in any place. You are still talking to the base, either SQL table or the SharePoint list. It is actually directly talking over there and making that delete that same concept. And then again, as a quick update over here too, is actually these were the correct ID numbers. For some reason, there were some big ones. I must have updated these a bunch of times. The permissions that you have in the central data source, SharePoint or SQL, those apply in your virtual tables as well. So if you only had create, read, and update, but no delete, well, you will not be able to delete that directly on this side. Right now, though, it still shows you the delete option, but it actually give you a little bit of an error. They may have fixed that piece. I'm not quite 100% sure yet. But the same thing, you are only seeing a virtual copy, basically a representation is what it is, a representation of that real database information over there. This is not a new database that it has created inside Dataverse. I just want to kind of really make sure that if anything that you forget, and if anything you remember, it is representation. You are representing that data from your data source over here. You are not making a full copy of it. But then there's some amazing functionalities available. Remember, now you've got a Dataverse table. So be it, it's virtual, but you can take now a SharePoint list and start putting it into your model-driven apps. That's one of the big things over here. So that's why at this point it's not so much that I'm going to end it, but I actually do want to talk to you about my the four reasons of why I really consider using these virtual tables. This is not for SharePoint and SQL folks to start leveraging Dataverse. It is not for them, because if you think about it, SharePoint and SQL people already have a SQL connector. They're able to go ahead and pull data in. They're able to go ahead and make their Canvas apps in, and things like that. It's for those people who basically have these model-driven apps. They've already got Dataverse tables over there, but they've also got very important information sitting in SharePoint or in SQL, and they want to go ahead and leverage that inside Dataverse. This is the way to do it. So key thing is that now that this functionality is coming out and saying that it's there for SQL, it's there for SharePoint, but you should not start getting too concerned. Like, do I have to start leveraging it? What is the reason for that? It is not for the SharePoint and SQL folks specifically to start leveraging Dataverse. If you're already a SharePoint and SQL user, keep using that. Yeah, but it is for those people purely from the other spectrum, the Dynamics 365 people who are very comfortable with model-driven apps, very comfortable with databases and the entire CRM system, but they've got very important information sitting in SharePoint and SQL. And they don't want to build any flows. They don't want to build any Canvas apps. They actually want to go ahead and just leverage that inside their model-driven apps. This is the way to do it, because remember, it is only a representation, and you do that. Other thing is you do not impact your capacity of your environments. When you go and start creating these environments and you actually create a Dataverse table, well, you're going to start consuming environment capacity. But in virtual tables, you're not. You're not saving any data over there. So you're not going to impact your entire capacity on that. Virtual tables allows relationships, and that's actually a demo that I don't have available right now. But once you go ahead and build your information, you've made all these tables come in, imagine you can build relationships either one-to-one, one-to-n, n-to-one kind of relationships, where now you can build another, say, another default table where columns could be coming in. One column could come from SharePoint, one could come from SQL, one could come from Dataverse, because you build these relationships. This is something you cannot do in Canvas apps. And trust me when I say that, because in Canvas apps, yes, you are able to go and pull all the data together. Yes, you can make it look like one table by adding multiple data tables inside a gallery or inside connectors, but it is still separate tables that come in. But when you start building virtual tables and start building these virtual table relationships, you truly can make all these other data tables together as one table. And then you can go and manipulate that however you want. It's a really neat functionality. And that's the whole concept. Better together is for that concept. When you go and build all these tables together, now you've got data sources all mingled and matched because they've got relationships. Relationships could be anything. Unique person's user principal name, or a person's you got primary IDs, which are the exact same one, or you've got relationships set up over there. Combine it together into one table, and then you can really make some great magic happen on that. So that's basically just the overview that I wanted to talk about and end with these things. The quick recap of everything that we just covered. We talked about the concept of virtual tables. And remember, the virtual tables, key term of virtual one is a representation. It is not the real data. It's a representation. Then I walked you through some of the examples. Okay, Excel is one of them. SharePoint is one of them. SQL is one of them. We went ahead and attempted to create one for SharePoint, but I walked you through the steps. Is that when you go through it, it does important things. It actually shows you what's the original names of that data source, whether it be SQL or Oracle. And then when you're going and creating that relationships, a virtual table, you have the option to change those column names. But then when you've gone and created that entire table, the permissions of the data sources apply directly to that SharePoint list, or that, that virtual table over there. Where in SQL or SharePoint, if you've got only whatever is the operations you have access to, create, read, update, whatever you can do over there, you can also do that in the virtual tables. And if you do anything in that data source like SharePoint or SQL, it will reflect that in your virtual table. If you delete something in the virtual table, it will reflect that in your data, in your actual data source as well. It's not a snapshot. It is actually a full representation of the data that you have. And then we kind of ended with some of these examples of like what it is that it can do and cannot do. specific things that it does not impact your capacity. And it's not for exclusively the SharePoint and SQL folks. It's purely from the other end, people who already have these apps, model-driven apps, full CRM systems. They want to leverage the SharePoint and SQL into the Dataverse. This is now how you can do that. So, I just want to thank you once again for attending the call. I will be more than happy to take any questions that you have. But basically, this is all that I wanted to cover. Hopefully, it helped you a little bit, gave you some of the ideas of what this virtual table is all about. It's still in preview, but at least start playing with it, and maybe get some ideas for that. So that's basically all I have.
All right. So Christian, we got a question from Eduardo Fernandez. Is asking how virtual tables will treat the unique IDs as SharePoint already have the ID column.
Yep.
Virtual
Yep.
table item has its own ID.
No, so when you go in, but the requirement for virtual table is it does need a unique ID. So SharePoint by default has list IDs, so it'll automatically go and leverage that. When we were going and actually creating that the virtual table connection, it automatically recognized, it actually took that SharePoint's list ID as that unique primary ID. It automatically went and did that. For SQL, you will actually have to go and do that. And that was one of the things. When you create a SQL table, you could create a table and start using it, but you need to go and add a primary identifier in SQL. So if you're going to use that SQL table as a virtual table, you will need to make sure that you have a primary ID column in SQL, and that's something that you have to do. SharePoint does it out of the box. So yeah.
Awesome, awesome. I don't think there are any additional questions, but I gotta just show this quickly. What Daniel's showing is amazing, and I believe this is the direction that the platform is going when it comes to data integration. The cost of Dataverse storage is compared to other tools. I mean, it's high. So if you can avoid, bringing data to the platform and reference the data, that's the best way to do it. And
Right.
what Microsoft is doing is they are creating connectors that would make the setup, will streamline the setup, just like Daniel showed. Drag and drop, click, and then matching columns and all that stuff. But for pro devs in the call, there are classes in the SDK that you can use to create your own providers for virtual tables. Say you have an Oracle database, or if you have any other database and you wanted to expose the data through virtual tables, you can do that as well. I'll throw the link on the chat. I've seen people do crazy stuff with this, so you're welcome to experiment um, as well. We got another question from Volenberg. How we can handle permissions between SharePoint lists and virtual tables? Indeed, SharePoint already have inherit permissions native. Can we reuse that? I'll give my answer. I don't know if it's the truth. I don't know if Dataverse will respect that. You're connecting to SharePoint under that connection reference. So if you have a user consuming the virtual table data in Dataverse, you're gonna have to rely on the security role settings for that particular user within Dataverse. I don't think that there will be a transposition of security setup and at that stage.
Just such one question. How can we handle with permissions between SharePoint lists and virtual tables? Indeed, SharePoint already has inherited permissions native. Can we use that? No. So whatever is the permission that you applied in SharePoint, that will affect how that table functions in Dataverse. So like I was saying, if you've gone ahead and contribute level is usually a access level in SharePoint. But if you kind of customize that contribute where people can only do add, edit, and update, well, that will affect directly in Dataverse. But when you pull that virtual table, it doesn't directly give them access to that environment or directly give them access to that thing. You can apply that granular permissions inside Dataverse as well. So a good way to resolve this problem is use security groups. Your Azure AD security group is the best way to go and do that. M365 groups is one of the way, but M365 groups could be just tied to an entire SharePoint site. Like one SharePoint site has got a full M365 group. But if you want to go ahead and really isolate down to that one list, then have a separate Azure AD security group tied to that list and use that same AD group directly in Dataverse as well. And it'll work at that level. Security groups is the best way.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I don't see any additional questions. And if you have, and if you want to speak up, you can unmute yourself and speak on the mic. If not, we can pause for today. But before we do that, I want to thank you, Daniel, for presenting this to us. This is amazing. I mean, I've seen the announcements. I didn't have a chance to test it out. It'll be nice to use this in conjunction to other things, especially in my realm of things. I do a lot of Power Pages, so I want to know how much can we leverage there as well between the two systems. But this is amazing. My expectancy is that this will grow. We're gonna have a lot of connectors. I mean, we have up to 1,000 connectors, I guess, in Power Apps, and 100 others for Automate. So my expectation is that we're gonna grow in the number of virtual table connectors, if you will, and it will make our lives a lot easier. So again, thanks everyone who joined the call. I'll pause the recording and then we'll stay on the line here if anybody has additional questions. I have some announcements to make, but we'll do it